Death Moccasins. Anna had finished all of the leather stocking tales, and with a head filled with images of Hawkeye, Uncas, and Chingachgook, she put the last book down and went to delve into her father's trove of Indian artifacts. He and Goethe, his barrister friend from Ligonier, had set out early that fine morning to hunt. She didn't expect them till dark, well announced by their drunken choruses and the yipping of the hounds. Ever since the day her father had arrived unexpectedly to simply withdraw her from the academy, her life had changed in so many ways. When they had arrived back in the city that day, she was met by a frantic bustle of activity. Strangers were loading trunks and packing crates for storage. She found Rosamond presiding over a harried kitchen maid placing the family's china into cartons. "Liebschein," she smiled, spotting her standing there dumbfounded as she set aside a porcelain gravy boat. "Come," and led her to her old room, pointing to a tall oblong package wrapped in a quilt. "This was your mother's mirror. See that it is unloaded, still wrapped, and placed immediately in the back of your closet at the lodge, behind some garments. A growing girl like you, my dear, must have a full-length mirror, even in the wilderness where that father of yours insists on taking you. We have argued, and I have lost, but I chose to disobey him in this one regard on your behalf." And with that she fled the room. Today, though, knowing that she had a few hours to herself, Anna intended to preen, and knew just what she would do. It had fallen to her to do what little cooking and cleaning was done for the two of them since he had given up his practice. No longer did the good doctor keep up his appearance. His Van Dyke had morphed into a full beard, his hair curled almost to his collar. His main concentration seemed to be on imbibing the most alcohol that he could contain, and still managed to pot a few squirrels and doves. Strange men came to sell him things, too. Indian artifacts, of which he had quite a handsome collection. Along with the trophy heads of deer and elk, some new items of interest appeared. There had always been a few ornate Iroquois tomahawks hung on the walls. Wonderful arrowheads resided in glass display cases, as were several beaded bags and moccasins, her favorites. But now there was, folded carefully and stored in a cedar trunk in his room, a white doeskin dress, whose yoke was hung with many glistening elk teeth. This came from a tribe called the Beautiful People, way beyond the Mississippi. Today she aimed to try it on. Often the men who brought these things scared her. Dirty, unkempt, some were missing teeth, and with horrible scarring, of which they were inordinately proud. They told frightening tales from wars beyond her comprehension as she crept close to listen. Mountain men, her father had called them, or scouts, or guides. Some she thought might be actual Indians, but she was afraid to ask, to be noticed. She had heard the word métis, but didn't know its meaning. The French they spoke was certainly not like what she had been taught. Occasionally one would try to catch her eye, causing her to quickly slip away to the safety of her room. They often brought big brown glazed jugs her father purchased that he teased her was elixir of the moon's rays, but wouldn't let her have any. Clear, oily, and glistening, it caused the men to lose consciousness much quicker than the darker alcohol. One night she saw her father hand over one of her mother's best cameos for a small woven blanket with a most unusual geometric design, not like the heavy woolen Hudson Bay ones he so favored. Many a night she found her father splayed out on the floor in front of a dead fire, with the men, wrapped up in one of these, quite content. Asleep or just passed out, who could tell? She'd grown used to this. She especially enjoyed the freedom it gave her to roam the surrounding woods unsupervised. But today she went quickly to the trunk. Inside were the favorite moccasins, the ones beaded all over, even to the very soles. Clutching them to her chest, she took also the beautiful doeskin garment. She found that she had to undress down to her thin muslin shift to get it to sit right on her slim frame. What a delight! Heavy, but her arms could swing freely with an imagined tomahawk, and with no stays constricting her waist, she could leap, twist, and turn. She assessed herself in the full-length mirror. I need braids, she thought. Nothing to do about her straw-like colored hair. Quickly she braided it. Oh, those elk teeth made such a lovely tinkly sound as she twirled, and the long fringes! Is there anything that so delights the heart of a young girl catching the edges of herself in a mirror where she sees the wings of true beauty flicked past. Self-love, then self-consciousness. Quickly she mouthed the remedy. Thankfulness. Thank you, Rosamund. She felt a slight catch at missing her mother, who knew all about vanity. As she ran her hands over the silky suede of the well-tanned skin, from her budding breast down to her slim hips, she leaned in closer to the glass. Is that a hole? A bullet hole? Over the heart? She ran her finger over it, mightily chastened. Then she remembered the moccasins, the beautifully colored beaded ones, as she stood there barefoot. She stooped and slipped them on, one by one, struck by the intricate handiwork, having spent so many hours doing crewel, embroidery, and cutwork that the nuns thought was so necessary a preparation for a young lady, and not liking it one bit. She couldn't imagine this. Every inch of the soles were covered. A bit large. Were they men's, perhaps? They felt wonderfully soft. Who were these people, dressed like this, feeling as lovely as she had ever felt in her life? Like a woodland princess, she padded softly out into the large, wood-timbered lodge to stand by the fireplace, imagining herself. A whoop of extreme displeasure cut through the air, and I whirled to see vexation fanned across her father's red, sweaty face. She hadn't seen or heard his arrival. "What are you doing?" he bellowed, standing his ground so resolutely that Goethe bumped into him, setting a good-sized brace of doves swinging madly, giving the few hounds bold enough to have followed him inside cause now to excitedly begin to bay. What had been a secret pleasure to decorate herself with some of her favorite items from her father's collections was secret no more, staring now abjectly at her feet. The elk teeth on her dress still clinking softly. It seemed to her that all she could hear was her father's labored breathing. It sounded like Jacob Yoder's young bull that he kept in too small a pen. There was another sound. Was that her heart? He barked, "Go change. Then we'll talk." Raging past her, clearing a small table, he sat down heavily, reaching for his hip flask. As she scurried past, Goethe with his fat fingers darted out to grip her bare exposed arms, turning her skillfully toward him in his large gut. In a liquored voice full of spittle, he spoke into her pale face, staring as though he were a miner, rising his stake to make a claim. All the while his small pig-like eyes raked her chest, pulling her closer to him. "Doc, she's developing into quite a little lady." This was no compliment delivered by a gentleman. She felt like he had just cursed her with some vile prediction, some uncontained desire that coiled forward out of him into the air. She flashed her eyes toward her father, silently beseeching him for help, but he was lost to the monogrammed silver flask pressed tightly to his lips, his head tilted heavenward. Wrenching herself free, Goethe's roiling laughter chased after her. Once in her room, she could not get changed fast enough. Then her father was upon her, roughly pulling the moccasins from her feet, while drunkenly shouting, "Take them off! Off!" She tried to tell him that she hadn't harmed them, that she had only walked on carpets. Then he was almost in tears, and anger was building in her, at a loss at his rage, at drunkenness and abandonment for not protecting her. And then they were both crying and shouting. He slapped her. First time ever. Then she listened, carefully. "They're for the dead, child," as he held both her small bare feet in his hands. "Their feet will never walk upon the good earth ever again." It felt so good to be touched after all this time. All she could think of in her panic was his wrath at her playing dress-up with artifacts, his treasured collection. She mumbled out through her tears, No, it's sacrilegious. Do you know what that means? It might bring harm on you, child." "Papa," she gasped, "you haven't called me that in ages." And she threw her arms around him then, finally seeing that he was concerned. He pulled her onto his lap and was stroking her hair, soothing her. "You're superstitious, Papa?" she asked him. No, but I believe in honoring, well, these customs. I don't want you to walk about in shoes that were meant for the dead," she finished speaking, and their eyes met. I want to know more about these people, these beautiful people. The Tsitsistas, the Cheyenne, he said. The Cheyenne? The Sissy? Oh, well, tell me more. Can we study them, please? Can you teach me? He stood up to leave, then paused, turned back, reached down for her hand, pulled her to her feet. Perhaps we'll go there someday. When they came into the big room, Goethe had gone, taking the brace of doves with him.